Hello, everyone, and welcome to another CPC Strategy hosted webinar. If this is not your first event with CPC Strategy, we are happy to have you here again for another webinar. If this is your first time with CPC Strategy, welcome, and we most definitely hope to see you in more events in the future. So, all of us here today acknowledge the difficulty of budget allocation and media planning, what advertising platforms to invest in, when to invest, how much to invest, how do you evaluate your campaigns, and so on. So, which brings us to today's topic, the full funnel e-commerce budgeting media plan at every stage. So in this webinar, our speakers will be reviewing blueprints on how to allocate your budget for every business stage from startup to traditional reseller. Of course, these are, ideal budget plans, but let us walk you through these ideal allocation plans and where your business lies today and how you can budget accordingly for a full funnel effect. So let me go over the logistics of today's events before anything else. I'd like to introduce myself. Let's see if I can click over here. Might need your help. Okay, great. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Alicia. I am the webinar coordinator at CPC Strategy. I'll be moderating today's webinar as well as handling all your questions on the back end. So before today's presentation, let me walk through the GoToWebinar panel and some logistics. So number one question we get, session recording and slides, will they be sent out? Yes. The recording and the slides will be sent out to all registrants within 48 hours, so rest assured you'll have the slides soon enough. We also want to point out the question tabs in the GoToWebinar panel. On the right side, you should have a tab that says questions. So, just expand that, send your questions my way. I'll be adding all the questions that come in to a queue to later pose on to Jason and Michael at the end of the webinar. If I do see that I'm getting the same question over and over for clarifications, I will ask them during that presentation just to clear the air before we move on. As well as any technical difficulties that you guys may be facing, just chat me through the questions as well, and I'll be helping you through the back end trying to troubleshoot. Another thing to mention is that we do have a handout. So underneath the question tabs, there should be a handout tab as well. You can expand that and you can download some resources that we have added onto there. Their guidebooks, their blog posts that are relevant to today's topic that might be a good additional resource for you all to have. Then last, logistic-wise, we have a couple poll questions, one at the beginning, kind of to, engage you all, kind of get a sense of who our audience is today, your expertise when it comes to budget, if you're all budgeting at full funnel, and then we'll have one towards the end when it comes to evaluation and scheduling an evaluation with CPC Strategy. So before we really get started and before I introduce our speakers, I want to introduce CPC Strategy to you all who might not be so familiar and explain our positioning in the e-commerce landscape. So we are founded in 2007, so we're just over 10 years old. We have over 500 active retail clients with quite a diverse portfolio ranging from CPG to apparel and even services when it comes to our clients. So we're a retail-focused paid search management company, and we specifically focus on the realms of retail-focused paid search and shopping, as well as Amazon sales acceleration, creative services on Amazon, content optimization, as well as social, really in the Facebook performance marketing realm. So now I would like to introduce you all to our speakers. We have Jason Bell, who's our Senior Retail Search Manager, and Michael Ward, who's a Lead Retail Search Manager, both CPC. Jason, if you'd like to introduce yourself to our audience, and then you can pass it on to Michael to introduce himself as well.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Annalicia. So welcome everybody to the webinar. If you've been on maybe a CPC strategy webinar about Google Shopping, you've probably heard my voice before. So hopefully I'm kind of familiar to some of you guys, but if not, then my name, I'm a Senior Retail Search Manager here, like Annalicia said. I've been working with CPC strategy for roughly, 7.5, 8 years now, in the SEM space for about 9. So I've definitely been working through a lot of, if you guys remember, free Google, and into Google Shopping. That's kind of my expertise currently. But I'm happy to be here today, and hopefully we can give you guys some insight into budget. And I'm also very, very happy to have Michael Ward here today, who's lead Retail Search Manager. I'd like to pass it over to Michael to kind of give you guys some insight into who he is.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Michael. I've been working at CPC Strategy for the better part of 3 years now, focusing on Google Shopping and Google Text, but also working with Facebook and display and a little bit of YouTube. So definitely excited to talk about full funnel budget planning, because that's a question that we run into a lot with our current clients. So I'm really excited to talk about this, and yeah, I'll pass on over to you, Jason, to get it started.
Perfect. I
Well,
know we have
actually, it's me.
we have a poll question.
I'll be going over today's agenda and launching the poll
Awesome.
before then I do pass it on to Jason to get to the real meat of the presentation. So just to give you all an overview of today's agenda, we'll be identifying your business's maturity level to help follow our guidance on budget allocation, that we provide from startup to wholesale. In the spectrum of business maturity. So we'll be also going over key metrics for evaluating your campaign and ad spend, allocating correctly, where you can adjust accordingly, as well as advertising platform offerings at every level, which means, Google, YouTube, Bing, Facebook. We'll kind of go over all of those platforms, as well as a walkthrough of budget implementation with examples of different business maturity levels. But before we do get there, I kind of want to get a feel of who in the audience is currently allocating budget for full funnel. So I currently have this poll up. Jason, Michael, I know that you can't see this. This is the poll question that I just asked is taking over our audience's screen, and we kind of just want to get a feel of yes or no. Michael, Jason, when it comes to your clients, do your clients usually divvy up their budget for a full funnel effect, or do they usually focus on maybe top of funnel if they're just beginning, or do you guys kind of, pitch, or do you see that it works best when you spread your budget across?
Yeah, definitely spreading the budget across. You kind of want to be everywhere in the funnel, but just to some degree. And I think that's what's going to be a big portion of what we talk about today. And so it really does depend on obviously the maturity level of the business, where they currently are, and what they have been doing so far.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And what we've seen is I tend to see with clients is they don't exactly know why their budget allocation is allocated how it is. So they maybe are spending on all parts of the funnel, but they're not sure exactly what percentage of the budget they should be spending there and how to really evaluate it. So that's really what we want to get into in this webinar, is just really discussing, why you want to allocate budget the way you do, and then how to evaluate that, and kind of what does that mean in terms of actual campaigns that you should be running.
Yeah, so it seems like what you just mentioned right now is that most of our audience is not yet sure how to allocate a full funnel budget, or they're maybe a little bit hesitant on what platforms to invest in. So about 28% are yes, they're investing full funnel. That's great. I hope we do have some insight for you all as to how maybe you can expand your budget on different platforms. And then we have, I guess I'm not the best at math, 72% are no, that they're not yet allocating full funnel, and hopefully will allow for some tips and some insights as to how they can then spread their budget. So again, that was 28 yes, they are budgeting full funnel, and then 72 is no, not just yet. So hopefully we have insights to you all. And now is when I will pass it on to Jason to kick it off.
Awesome. Thanks again, Alicia. So today we want to start with, obviously identifying where your business stands today. I think this is a majorly important part to understanding where you should be as a blueprint, pushing your budget. And so knowing where you stand as a business is very important. I want to first start off with two major, obviously, business types here, whether you're a brand owner, versus a reseller. And so obviously, for example, if you were Nike and you're going online and starting to do your own campaign, selling your shoes and other apparel, you'd be considered and fall under the brand. So that's fairly obvious. If you're, say, someone like a Dick's Sporting Goods or Sports Chalet, I'm not sure if that's even around anymore, but a reseller of, say, Nike products, Adidas, all these other, athletic apparel brands, for example, you could be considered under the reseller umbrella there. And then moving down, looking at the business phase, we're splitting up into three major phases here. So a startup, so obviously a business who's very new, really starting to work on demand generation, get their business and brand off the ground. Moving on to mature, so someone who's obviously been around, or a brand that's been around for quite a while, or at least has an idea of the customers, have an idea of who the brand is, and they're doing searches, or they're very aware of the brand itself. And then thirdly here, historically wholesale, so maybe you've been B2C for most of the time, and you're starting to move in to pushing digitally online. And so that would be a different phase as well. And then looking at the reseller side, we have traditional resellers, so someone who doesn't really have their own house brand of products, and they're just reselling, again, to use that example, Nike, Adidas, Puma, any of these, athletic apparel brands, they're considered traditional resellers, and they don't necessarily have their own house brand of products or services that they're pushing. And then lastly, a reseller and house brand. So you do a little bit of both. You have the brands that you're reselling, as well as say your own product, your own house brand that you're also focused on. So kind of a dual brand and reseller type of tactic there. And then lastly, here at the bottom, you'll see the campaign types, which really fit into the funnel and what we're going to be talking about today, starting with demand generation. So trying to generate the demand for your brand, for your products, services, demand fostering, obviously taking that and pushing users a little bit further down the funnel, kind of caressing them down into the demand capture portion where you're actually converting them, and then reacquisition for users who either fall off, or obviously users who are taking from a single purchaser and trying to push into, say, a VIP or someone who purchased from you very often. As we move on here, I want to go towards the leveraging the right digital advertising channels through the funnel. So Michael and I are going to be talking about the actual stages of the funnel here. As you see on the right here is basically an upside down pyramid. This is something that you're probably very aware with. There's definitely different types of funnels, so where they'll put together like the interest and consideration is kind of one, for example. But here we like to split it out into 4 different groups, starting off with awareness, which is definitely the top of the funnel, as you can see here. And we also have neat little on the left side little icons for the different types of channels. So you get YouTube, you see here, Gmail, Facebook, Instagram, then the more traditional mid to bottom funnel ones like Google, Bing, Amazon, even Facebook, again, when we're talking about retargeting. So we're going to be going into that a little bit further today as well. But to kind of start again at the top here, awareness, and this is really consumers who are at a very early stage of their journey in terms of what product or service that they're looking for. They're going to be usually unfamiliar with your brand or your product offering, and the goal is to capture the traffic in that awareness funnel of users who are related to maybe users who we currently have, or really just spread a wide net to get people into your funnel and push your brand and get that awareness up. Then we're moving down into interest, which is kind of top middle of the funnel here. This is users who are usually doing further research or early research into products and services that maybe you or maybe some of your competitors may offer. And they're starting to get an idea of what your brand, service, and product is all about. And as we're moving there, we're looking at using other audiences to push a bit more traffic when we're talking about lookalike or similar audiences, depending again on what platform you're on. In-market audiences on Google, affinity audiences on Google as well, direct response ads. There's a lot of, as we start to get a bit more specific and honed in on a target that starts to understand who the brand, who us as a brand or reseller are, then we're starting to push a little bit more of that interest phase and the interest types of campaigns. Moving down in consideration. So here we're starting to get to mid-bottom of the funnel. Consumers are definitely more specific in what they want and what they're searching for, and they are now considering your brand, product, or service as an option for them. And then lastly, bottom of the funnel, which the goal is to drive everybody down to this bottom of the funnel to purchase or become a lead. These are consumers who are definitely very familiar with your product and brand, and they're ready to purchase. So the idea is to push people from the top of the awareness phase down to the consideration phase, and eventually the golden ticket here is to get them into that purchase phase, and then at some point reacquisition. And so we're going to go further into the different channels. So you saw the little icons next to the funnel previously. I want to start with YouTube a little bit. So this is obviously something that I feel is kind of a bit misunderstood. It's definitely a type of channel where you can spend a lot very quickly. And I think that's really with all display channels. Very easy if you're not really paying attention to how the setup is, what you're really targeting, what performance metrics, which we'll talk about a little bit later, to look at. It's very easy to spend a ton at this portion, which isn't necessarily bad, but it really, again, will depend on kind of where you are in that business maturity. But YouTube, despite having all these, we have campaign types within YouTube for all 4 of these different breakouts and different stages of the funnel. For the most part, we usually consider YouTube more of a top of the funnel type of demand generation channel. Obviously, again, they have, if you look at the bottom, YouTube for action, TrueView, InStream for shopping. So there's definitely some different types of ads that are geared more towards the bottom of the funnel and purchasing. But YouTube in itself, a lot of the spend I usually do with a lot of my clients is trying to get that demand generation, use demographic or geographic targeting, or similar audiences as well. So pushing those two top ones, awareness and interest, together, and keywords that are related to them, their product, service, or even competitors, to try to push the YouTube content, different videos and whatnot, to users who fit the description of who would feel, excuse me, would fill the bottom, and move that we can easily move to the middle and bottom of the funnel. And then we get down, obviously, consideration, purchase, where we have things that we're retargeting, a little more intent there, again, and then YouTube for action and TrueView for purchasing. I do want to move it on to Michael to get through Google, Bing, and Facebook. I know he does a lot of that with his clients, and I'd love to hear some insight there. Michael.
Yeah, for sure. And just to start, as you can notice, YouTube is on the top of the awareness pyramid here, but it isn't found anywhere else. So kind of like what Jason talked about, there are options for YouTube throughout the funnel. However, most of the time what we see is YouTube fits in best on awareness, and that's where most of the spend come from. I know YouTube is definitely trying to revamp, and hopefully, or they're moving more towards building out some more options for interest, consideration, and purchase targeting. So it's definitely something to be aware of and make sure you're taking advantage of. But to start, we normally just group YouTube under the awareness tab for now, but there are some nice campaign options for those who want to run YouTube for interest, consideration, or purchase. On the other side, display and Gmail are both very good awareness tools on the Google side of things. Again, that's when you're really trying to show ads to people who you think might be in your target audience. Maybe not entirely sure yet, and you kind of want to cast a broader net to get more eyeballs on your products or get people to your site, just so they learn a bit more about your brand, or what kind of initiative you're pushing, say it's a new product launch, or a new brand entirely, or just you want to reinforce a brand message. Gmail display, really great for that. Really good about getting eyes on site, and there's a whole host of targeting options on there. So even though you are in the awareness funnel, there's a whole bunch you can do in terms of segmenting out certain sites or audiences, or targeting methods that really get in front of users in a smart way, as opposed to just casting a super broad net. And then you want to, on Google, then you want to drag people from the awareness down into the interest targeting. And that really goes for non-brand search and non-brand shopping. So for example, if I'm Nike, that's just someone searching for like athletic t-shirt instead of Nike t-shirt. Those are people who generally know what they want to buy. There's some search intent there, but they're not really sure what they want to buy. So they're still in kind of the upper funnel phase of doing their research. They know they want to buy a product. They know generally what type of product they want to buy, but they're not sure who they want to buy it from. So at this point, that's what non-brand search and shopping is there for. So you want to make sure you're collecting those queries in a smart way, not showing up for anything too irrelevant, but making sure that you're showing up for queries where people are doing their research, and getting out in front of them. And then once they've done their research, you want to pull them into the consideration cycle. So that's branded shirts, branded shopping, and ISO shopping. Branded search and shopping are pretty straightforward. People searching for your brand or a brand that you carry if you're a reseller. So this would be a search like Nike athletic shirt. So that's something you obviously want to be out in front of, be aggressive on, say on search and shopping. ISO shopping is slightly different. It's a non-brand search that is maybe a bit more specific. So say instead of just like athletic t-shirt, it's something like red athletic t-shirt with stay dry technology, and say stay dry technology, something that Nike has. That way you can, pull any term with stay dry technology into its own campaign. So it's still a non-brand search, but it's a little bit better than just a generic search. It has more intent on there. There's more specific actions around your product, and that's why you want to pull it to its own type of campaign and be a little bit more aggressive and consider it as a consideration. And then finally, on the purchase side of things, that's where you get into RLSA and display retargeting. RLSA is just really about getting out, being more aggressive to anyone who has been on your site before or is a cart abandoner, being very aggressive with your search, shopping, display ads. And then display retargeting is, again, showing people what products they potentially saw on site when they're on the display network. So it's really trying to get people who have been on your site or have purchased you before to come back and become VIPs or multiple purchases, or even complete their first purchase if they're still shopping around, not fully sold yet. Moving on to Bing. Bing is very similar to Facebook in a lot of, or Google in a lot of ways. On the awareness side, the display network on Bing isn't quite as large. The main type of ad unit that you have for awareness on Bing are the native ads, which we've seen do pretty well in terms of native placements across Bing, Yahoo, and AOL. On the interest side of things, non-brand search, non-brand shopping, pretty much the same as Google, and same with consideration. You can take a lot of the same strategies that you run on Google and just fully port them over onto Bing. So branded search, branded shopping, ISO shopping, and then RLSA. The important note here is that there's not as many options for display retargeting on Bing, so really RLSA is your best bet. Also, search volume in general is lower on Bing, so even though the strategies are the same, you're probably going to see a little bit less in terms of traffic, as I'm sure any of you know who've advertised on Bing have seen that before. It still can be a very valuable channel, just I wouldn't expect what you expect on Google. Finally, moving on to Facebook. Facebook is definitely very different than Google and Bing. On the awareness side of things, there are a lot of great options in terms of demographic and interest targeting. Really great way to build out your brand is on Facebook, especially considering the demographic and interest targeting that they have. To build awareness campaigns is really robust. So if you're, say a new apparel brand, you can get really granular with what kinds of audiences you would want to build just by looking at demographic and interest. So that way you make sure you're getting out in front of the right customers. And that's why, Facebook advertising has grown exponentially. As sure as any of you know who've advertised on Facebook, the targeting options in terms of the awareness are very good. Also, the ad units that they have been rolling out also look really great in terms of building awareness. Moving down the funnel, interest and consideration targeting. Lookalike prospecting is really where you want to go. Build off your customer website data to say build lookalikes off past purchasers or product viewers or even high ROI, high value past purchasers to build out audiences and then show them different creative. So these can kind of be pushed together for interest and consideration. However, there are generally a few differences between interest type lookalike prospecting campaigns and consideration. You could send them different messaging, potentially focus on different audiences. Like, for example, you'd probably want to run with a past purchasers lookalike for a consideration audience, whereas for an interest one, maybe you just want to do people who look like people who like your page or something like that. So they're very similar, but there are a couple separate things you want to do, and the ad creative you show for an interest audience versus a consideration audience should be pretty different. And finally, on the purchase side of things, you have remarketing with dynamic product ads. It's similar to Google dynamic remarketing, if any of you are familiar with that, in that anyone who's been to your site, you can segment out and then show them the products that they've seen on site, or you can create a static ad that you show to remarketing audiences on Facebook. So it's really just another channel, get out back in front of them. So ideally, you want to complement all these channels together, and I think that's what we're going to kind of move on to the next phase when talking about allocation, budget allocations per awareness, interest, consideration, or purchase. So with that, I'll throw it on over to Jason.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, Facebook in itself has been pretty huge, I want to say, over the past couple of years now. They've been doing a lot of things on their back end as well. Very, very good for brand awareness, as Michael was saying. So definitely something we should definitely be looking at if you're not already. I think Facebook, sometimes people are a little scared to do. I definitely recommend it, even if it's just starting with that purchase funnel. But as Michael was saying, we're going to move on now to the actual ideal budget strategy at every stage. So one thing I want to do to preface this is that every business is different. And these are going to be our general blueprint, but isn't any type of sacred text or any specific percentage that you need to be using. It's just really guidelines to what we would initially recommend and what we've seen with some of our customers when we kind of blob them together to really understand what we're currently doing from a budgeting standpoint and what we've done in the past that has worked well for us. So initially, I'm going to be going through every single maturity phase here. I want to start with the startup phase for brands, and kind of you can see here the different types of capture or traffic or campaign types that we're running. Where we're starting here, you can look for every single one will have something similar to this. So reacquisition, demand capture, demand fostering, and demand generation. So to kind of go through this, demand generation being the top of the funnel, awareness campaigns, generating demand for your brand, service, product, demand fostering. So taking that demand and kind of moving it down to that second part of the funnel and fostering it and trying to push people further down into that demand capture phase where you're really bottom of the funnel. And same with the reacquisition where we're starting to do that remarketing on our channels. For example, dynamic remarketing within Google or something like that. So to start, when we're looking at this startup phase, it's very clear that demand generation obviously it's skewed towards that, and that's because no one currently, when you're in the startup phase, really knows who your brand is, or obviously very new. So the goal here is just trying to get the word out, and there's a high focus on generating awareness and demand for your brand. And so that's why we see roughly 60% in this example of pushing people towards the demand generation, towards the top of the funnel, whether we're doing YouTube, Facebook again, different types of display networks to try to get that cheaper traffic pushed through to fill the top of the funnel. Ideally, it's going to be with users who are have a propensity to be, I guess, like our brand. So when we're looking at, say, lookalike audiences or users who are visiting the websites of our competitors, this is ideally where we start, but definitely a lot of our spend is going to be skewed towards the demand generation. And then, obviously once we get that and fill the top of the funnel, we're going to skew the second largest portion of our budget towards demand fostering, as we're trying to then be a bit more in our minds and build our brands for the customers that we're bringing in at the top of the funnel. Moving down to the smallest percentages here, we're actually trying to capture that demand in reacquisition. So just kind of sum everything up really quickly from the startup perspective, the goal is really to build our brand. We're not necessarily looking for a bunch of conversions right off the bat. We're not mature enough for people to maybe be going onto Google and searching our brand right away. But as we push some of that demand generation, some of the higher funnel campaigns, maybe we can start to see that our maybe direct traffic, organic traffic, or branded searches that we still have set up in just smaller budgeting will start to grow in traffic over time. And that's one more call out I want to make clear as well, is you want to be visible as a brand, no matter what maturity you are in every single part of the funnel. The goal here is just to understand where you should be pushing most of your budget. And so that's where we are with a startup. As we move forward with a business that's a bit more mature, so these are a business who are more established presence. They have an existing customer base. You want to, at this point, move some of your budget away from the early phases of that cheap customer acquisition that we were really focused on in the startup phase, and you really want to start to prioritize some of the further middle to bottom of the funnel campaigns, where we're starting to look at, say, customer lifetime value. We're starting to look at retention and really trying to drive conversions down to the lower part of the funnel. So as you'll see, our demand generation went from a staggering 60%, and we cut that in half. And we're starting to look at growing the demand fostering portion, and specifically the demand capture and reacquisition, where users already know who our brand are. So they're already doing searches for us and products that we sell. And so being able to emphasize and focus and improve our performance and efficiency on our demand capture, and then reacquisitioning and getting users back, again, that kind of fits in with customer lifetime value. That's a very important part of where budgeting should be used for a mature brand. And moving to historically wholesale, so again, these are users or brands who are starting off offline, for example, maybe B2B, and then pushing into the B2B space or B2C space, excuse me, online. So these are, again, more established offline brands who are starting to make a push just fully into the digital landscape. The current benefit they have is that they have that brand recognition potentially offline. In brick and mortar stores is an example as well. And so their prioritizing of the budget should push more into demand capture, with everything else being more of a balance. And so you'll see, the reacquisition at 22.2%, demand generation 22.2%. Those things are still important. And like I mentioned before, we want to be prevalent across the funnel. But now we're looking more at capturing the demand. We do have that brand presence in terms of users who are familiar and customers who are familiar with us. We want to make sure we're able to take those users who are online searching and actually convert them and capture that demand. And now moving away from the brands themselves and into actual traditional resellers, and the next one will be for house brands. So just a little bit about both. They both benefit from obviously having established brand presence, whether that be the reseller itself, again, like a Dick's Sporting Goods or something like that, that's selling a bunch of different brands. They benefit from having that brand presence. And then, or if you have a house brand, same thing, maybe you have offerings or via in-store or online audiences, so you have a bit of presence versus, say, a startup in the brand arena. Both of them need to capture demand rather than essentially create it, but they go about it a little bit differently, right? So in this example with the traditional reseller, our demand generation is very, very low. And that's because we don't sell any of our own products. We don't have a house brand to worry about and really push in terms of marketing. So we're really trying to capture the demand of users who are searching for brands or products that we actually sell. So our goal again is really skewed towards demand capture and capturing this demand for brands that we sell that already have this this audience out there on Google or Facebook or Bing and doing searches. We want to capture that, and so that's where a lot of the focus comes from. And then the reacquisition, so getting people to come back, whether it's because they're a cart abandoner, getting them to come back and convert, or turning someone who's purchasing one time into someone who's purchasing two times, 2 to 3, etc., for becoming a VIP or a loyal customer. And there was a stat that on one of the other webinars that we were giving as well, is that especially if you're in this phase or really in any phase, but you start to have an audience and you're looking at customer lifetime value, the ability to turn someone who is purchased once into purchasing twice then increases their chances to become a loyal, customer. So maybe that's 4, 5, 6 times just purchasing from your brand often shoots up 33%. So if that's not something you're currently doing, regardless of what stage you're in when you're starting to work on reacquisition, is turning those one-time customers into a two-time customer and then on even further is very, very important. That's something that definitely should be looked into. And so looking at the traditional reseller, you obviously get, again, 60% demand capture, which is kind of the big highlight there, and 25% reacquisition. But when we're looking at house brands, it shifts a little bit. And again, that's because a house brand will have their own brand that they're also selling or trying to push. And that's where the demand generation comes from. And so they're trying to push their own products as well, and just demand generation. So we take a little bit of that from demand capture and reacquisition to push into that demand generation. But obviously demand capture is still a major part of our budgeting because we do have a lot of brands that we are reselling that again already have that demanded or that generation demand generation already put in place, and we just want to make sure we're in front of users who are doing those searches. And again, for any reseller, I think reacquisition is going to be a very important part. And I want to move forward now with key metrics to evaluate your campaigns. So I'm going to split this initially into kind of take that funnel and split it in half. So we're going to be talking about first the awareness and then the interest portion. And then secondly, we'll obviously go through the next two. But when I think about awareness and interest, I'm really looking at metrics that are more related to reach and engagement. And this isn't to say that conversion rate or driving conversions for people who are focusing more on awareness and interest is not important. That's obviously very important. The bottom line at the end of the day is going to be the most important in the profitability of your business. But when we're talking about the campaigns that are set up, again, maybe YouTube, when we're doing some awareness campaigns, our main metric should not be conversions on an awareness campaign. We have options through the YouTube channel to push types of traffic that are maybe focused more towards the bottom of the funnel. But initially, when we're looking at, again, awareness and interest campaigns, the goal isn't to push a bunch of conversions right off the bat. It's more to generate some of that awareness and push users into the top of the funnel and then into the rest of our campaigns to push them down to eventually converting. So some reach and engagement metrics that we recommend taking a look at, obviously percent of new sessions. So just the number of new users and new sessions that are coming to your site. That's obviously very, very important to keep track of, making sure, especially in the early phases of your business, in the startup phase, you're going to be wanting to fill that funnel, get as many new users to your site as possible. The goal here is obviously just because we get new users don't mean that they're engaged in the content or really even relevant. So that's going to be an important metric moving forward as well. Social reach was something you may be seeing on Facebook. Bounce rate, that's important as well. And I put adjusted bounce rate also because I think it's very easy to look at bounce rate just in itself and make an assumption of what the performance is. So say my bounce rate is low. So I have, say, a 15% bounce rate, which is very, very good. That doesn't necessarily mean that the users on my site are engaged, right? So if I have a bounce rate that's very low, it could potentially mean that a user has gone onto our site through an ad, right, to one of our landing pages, not really seen what they wanted, but there was different options for them to click around and get to different pages. So maybe they clicked around a couple different pages and then they came off the site. The bounce rate there would be very low at that point where they're visiting multiple pages, but the engagement of that user doesn't necessarily mean that it's very high. So I think, just looking at bounce rate as, and a number as itself is going to be difficult to make a conclusion as to, because my bounce rate is low, everyone's engaged on my site. And so that leads us into looking at several different other metrics and even creating an adjusted bounce rate where we're taking that into account, time on site and whatnot. And so that's where you can't necessarily just take one of these, each one of these metrics and look at them in a bubble. It's very important to look at all these and understand both your users, the pages they're landing on, the content that you've created, your business, and kind of pushing them together to understand how your users navigate your site, how they use your site, what they're coming in on, just to get a clear picture of whether engagement's actually there, right? Just because we get a ton of traffic, again, doesn't mean maybe our reach is high, but our engagement could be very low. So again, looking at metrics like time on site will help with engagement, number of pages viewed, the average session duration, and then two important things here. Really, the micro conversions is one that really stands out here. And micro conversions can be several different things. So whether someone is, getting to our site and they're filling out this little form here, or they're clicking on, nearest location, and you can set up a lot of these micro conversions, which usually micro conversions will lead somebody down a path to the macro conversion, which basically is what you need on your site. Is it a sale? Is it generating a lead? And so micro conversions are something that can be very, very helpful in understanding what things people do on site that will lead them to eventually becoming a converter on site. But there's a little caveat there, which I'll go into the next slide. And then lastly, custom events. So obviously within GA or the platform that you're using to monitor traffic, you can create custom events of users who are maybe, again, signing up for newsletters, or maybe scrolling halfway down the page, or things like that, where you can create custom events that you feel like are very useful to understanding how customers are using your website and whether they're engaged or not. And then looking at the second part of the funnel here, so the middle to bottom part, consideration and purchase, we're starting to look more at the actions and conversions of users on our site, and obviously the metrics within our campaigns. So looking at click-through rate, what our CTR is on our ad. So obviously that has to do with whether our messaging is correct with the users that we're targeting. The conversion rate, so that's pretty self-explanatory. How well are they converting on our site, whether that be, again, a sale or lead generation. Excuse me. Cost per conversion, or CPA, or CPO if you like to use cost per order, and anything that's all kind of the same there. How much does it cost per, conversion? So again, as we're getting those conversions, are we spending too much on some of these other maybe top of the funnel campaigns and seeing a really high CPA, but we have certain areas where it's very low, so we're interested in being maybe a bit more aggressive there. ROAS and I put and because honestly you should be looking at both a ROAS, or a cost of sale, and your ROI, or your actual profit. But a lot of users will just obviously just get stuck in looking at ROAS, but just because your ROAS is high doesn't mean your profit, is high. And that's something, again, getting into customer lifetime value, and that's a whole other webinar in itself. But the thing that I also want to kind of push out here is that, and this happens a lot when we're dealing with our clients, is that we're so focused on that ROAS number when there's still so much more, when it comes to your business than, okay, is my ROAS 10 or is my ROAS 5? I need to hit that. And so that's something, again, a whole other webinar for that, but that would be a metric that you'd really want to still be really close to and look at, especially as we get to the bottom of the funnel, and whether it makes sense to, does your ROAS make sense on your branded shopping campaigns, or your ISO shopping campaigns, or your reacquisition campaigns as well. Assisted conversions, again, how things are moving down the funnel. That's very important to see what campaigns, maybe you can look at campaigns that are starting up in the top middle of the funnel, and look at that they have assisted conversions that will assist these consideration and purchase funnels. And then this is related to the micro conversion. So obviously the macro conversion, so the main conversion goal on your site, whether it be to get a sale, or whether it be to have someone sign up or get a lead. All micro conversions, or all macro conversions, are made up of different micro conversions. But you don't want to, micro conversions are great. I think they're very important, but it's very easy to also get really stuck in, okay, if we need people to keep signing up for this newsletter, and when they sign up for the newsletter and they click, store nearest me, for example, they have X percentage of chance to convert. So we need to make this button bigger, and we need to like that's all part of the science, right, of landing page optimization. But it's very easy to get too stuck in the micro conversion. So again, having a full view of how everything works together and a full understanding, it's definitely not easy. There's a lot that you have to take into consideration. But macro conversions again, the bottom line, are you converting, is going to be very important to looking at your middle to bottom of the funnel. And again, custom events. So these can be custom based on the different types of landing pages or actions that you have on your site for these types of campaigns. And this, I just want to kind of throw this one in here as well, because I think this is something that's important that I don't necessarily think that everyone's looking at. Again, a lot of even potential new clients, until we kind of give them the rundown on what we look at, we'll start with, okay, my non-brand paid search campaign, right? It's hitting a 2 ROAS. I need a 6 ROAS. It is not profitable for us. But as you start to look at how that actual campaign, that's again maybe a middle of the top funnel campaign, is helping to push traffic or orders in a middle to bottom funnel campaign, it's very clear that there is more weight that can be held onto those campaigns that are in the top of the funnel. So that's another way that, okay, we're looking at certain metrics at these top mid-funnel campaigns, and we have certain ones that we want to hit, but still looking at how they convert, and then looking at how they assist in your other campaigns that are middle to bottom, understanding all of that. Again, this is kind of a whole deal holistically. How it's all working together is very important. And this is actually a report that you can pull from GA if you're using that. And I'm sure there's other options, whether you're using like Core Metrics or Omniture or something like that. But in this example, we're just trying to learn about the customer's journey, right? Identify which paths are the highest value. Again, you can get some of this too in like AdWords, for example. In the attribution, you can see these different paths as well to get an idea that if you have your campaign set up between non-branded, branded, you can get a lot of information of how well your non-branded is actually doing in terms of fostering leads or conversions into your branded campaigns. Awesome. All right. So that was all of the metric stuff. I know it's not the nicest or funnest, most exciting thing to talk about, but Michael does have some great, awesome examples that he put together to actually give you guys an idea of what putting your budget allocation into practice looks like.
Yeah, because I think, thanks, Jason. And I think that's what really most important. So starting from, all right, this is where our business is, and this is our maturity cycle, and then this is our budget. What does that actually mean in terms of where we allocate budget in general, in terms of looking at the funnel, and then going into which campaign types do we set up? What do we start? Where do we start? So that's why I wanted to pull a few examples of the most common types of businesses that we see. So starting with a startup example. So in this example, I created a fictional startup called Sunshine Apparel. Apparel company generally gears towards like the surf market. Sunshine Apparel's investors are allocating about $10,000 per month to spend on digital advertising. So what does that mean in terms of maturity level budget allocation? So because they're startup, and generally what we see works best for startup is going hard on the demand generation and fostering, and then at the same time make sure you're there with 20% of your budget with demand capture and reacquisition. So that would mean splitting up the budget to $6,000 a month to demand generation, $2,000 for demand fostering, and $1,000 each for demand capture and reacquisition. So this is an example what a budget breakdown would be per channel and per campaign, given a $10,000 per month budget and the maturity status of Sunshine Apparel. So on the left are the different campaign types that fall into each stage of the funnel and a sample breakdown of an initial budget. So we can talk for days about the best practices around each campaign type listed above, but kind of to keep us to the point of this webinar, we're just going to stick to the budget allocations for each campaign type. However, it is important to know that with each campaign type, you need to make sure you're in there and actively managing and setting up with best practices, because it's one thing to just set up a Facebook demographic targeting campaign that's very broad, and it's another thing to do a very highly targeted Facebook demographic or interest campaign that's generating awareness in a more smarter way. So the actual implementation of the account of the campaigns is very important. So this is more of just a blueprint of where to spend, but not exactly the construction of the campaigns and how to actually implement. But we did want to just give you that caveat. Also, something else that you might notice is that there are a few campaign types crossed out. This isn't to show that these aren't valuable campaign types, but more to illustrate the reality of budget constraints. In an ideal world, we'll have a huge marketing budget where we can test out every single channel listed. But in the real world, you obviously don't have that type of budget allocation, which is perfectly okay. You have to make choices on which campaigns you want to try first. Sometimes you have a budget that's a lot more than this, sometimes a lot less. There's still options where you can have a full funnel approach even with a smaller budget. You just have to make a few more sacrifices or choices on where you start. Also, as a general rule of thumb, it's best to give a campaign type enough budget to fully test it rather than split a small budget between multiple campaigns so none of the campaigns get enough traffic to really run tests and optimize. So you don't want to spread yourself too thin, which is why we suggest in some of these channels to really only focus on one campaign type, say in the interest section here, as opposed to spreading it evenly between 3 where you can't really spend enough in 3 to actually learn anything or make optimizations. So as we kind of talked about before, going back to this Sunshine Apparel startup example, we want to spend most of the budget on awareness. So that means splitting the budget fairly evenly, at least to start, on Facebook demographic interest targeting, YouTube demographic and geographic targeting, and Google display and Gmail ads. And with the sacrifice of we don't have enough budget to leave over for Bing. Sorry, Bing, to start. But this is where you really want to get eyes on your brands and help acquire customers so then Sunshine Apparel can scale. So from there, we can take the initial customer data that we have from Sunshine Apparel to start building out interest-based campaigns. In this example, we want to take the keyword data that we're starting to see based on awareness, maybe keywords people are searching on site, or maybe some keywords that you tend to see popping up in your display campaigns if you're doing any keyword targeting there. And then starting to build out Google and Bing search and shopping non-branded ads. So people may be looking for, surf t-shirt or, surf shirts for surfing, anything like that. Starting that interest targeting and starting to build your customer base there. Hopefully once you've started to build that brand awareness. And then moving down the funnel, you're going to be spending the least here, as kind of Jason said before, simply because you're not going to have enough users to actually advertise to here. You want to make sure you're 100% visible on the consideration and purchase campaign types to make sure when someone's searching for Sunshine Apparel, we show up, because you don't want to even be spending $6,000 a month on, say YouTube ads to get your name out there. But then when someone actually searches for your brand term, you're nowhere to be found. That's obviously a lot of wasted spend right there. So you always want to make sure you're maxing this out. However, this example with a startup budget or with a new company that has a somewhat smaller startup budget or a budget of this amount, you're only going to be spending about $1,000 just because there's not going to be that many branded searches out there. And on the purchase side, you're not going to have a ton of people on site. Even though you want to make sure you're retargeting all those people, you're not going to be enough to really be spending over $1,000 per month. But also, as Jason said earlier, you want to be aware of, as you spend more on the awareness side of things and the interest top of funnel campaign types, that you're going to start to see more people doing branded searches or more activity on your website. And thus, you're going to start to see your spend start to go up in your branded search and shopping. Now, this is exactly what you want to see. So I wouldn't be afraid of reallocating this budget when needed, especially if you're starting to see that you're getting more branded searches than your budget really allows for. Shifting some of that budget into these consideration and purchase campaigns is going to be what you want to do, or expanding your overall budget, because generally these type of campaigns convert really well for really high ROI. So it's pretty much a no-brainer to start increasing the budget there.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think that brings another kind of quick point I wanted to make is being able to be fluid. And I'm not saying fluid with your budget in terms of, okay, I have 10K budget, I need to go to 12 now, I need to come down to 8. That's obviously always helpful to be able to do that, but that's not always a reality. But when I say fluid, it means understanding that, there isn't this, we broke it out in terms of, okay, I am a startup, I am now mature, I am, it's not always this black and white switch over. It's definitely gradual and it can definitely change. And as you start, like Michael was saying, in that awareness, and you start to see users come to your site more, or you're starting to see more branded searches on Google and Bing, being able to, you eventually take that, say, 6K in awareness, bring that down to 5 and allocate that extra 1,000 into consideration and purchase if you start to see the signals that lead you down that path.
Yeah, exactly. And something else you want to be cognizant of is even within, say, one of the awareness campaign type, you want to be fluid within that too. So say you see your Google display ads are seeing a really low cost per click and a really high engagement rate from the users who are coming from those ads. Yet on YouTube, you're saying, you're spending a lot, you're not getting as many customers, and you notice those customers aren't as maybe qualified, or they're not engaging with your brand as well. be fluid and pull budget away from YouTube and put it to what's working, even within the same campaign type. You don't want to be too tied down. And so that's why it's important to be constantly evaluating what you're doing on a week by week, month by month basis, so you know exactly what's working for you and what isn't, or if you need to change something up. So maybe you just need to change up what you're doing on YouTube, reevaluate your ad creative or your targeting strategy there in order to get a cheaper CPC, or you want to move away from that channel altogether and put it towards an awareness type program that is working better for you already. And so moving on, that's kind of the startup example. And so a mature brand, say this is a strong water bottle company. In this example, they have a bigger budget, about $25,000 per month to spend on digital advertising. And so that means the starting budget allocation would be split more evenly throughout the funnel. So you have about $7,500 a month on demand generation and demand capture, and $5,000 a month on fostering and reacquisition. So what this means is a mature brand in general should be allocating their budget pretty evenly across the entire funnel. You need to balance new customer acquisition with capturing current demand for product and retaining customers. And so in this example, we want to show what the budget allocation per campaign type if the starting budget was a bit higher. But you can see even with a $25,000 per month budget, we still can't afford to go live with every type of campaign, which highlights the needs to always choose the channels you want to advertise on carefully, since it's usually unrealistic to be on all available channels and all available campaign types and actually do it well, unless your budget is really large. So yeah, and just to reiterate here, this kind of shows a sample breakdown of splitting things out, but there's no such thing as set it, forget it. Digital marketing, you don't want to just set up non-brand text ads and let it run. You want to be constantly adjusting keyword bids. Like say if you're doing a non-branded text ad search campaign, you want to be adjusting keywords bids based on performance, refining ad copy to get the right messaging in front of the right customers, and constantly mining for new keyword opportunities that can help expand your coverage while all staying above your target KPIs. So this kind of illustrates that you can be live on all these channels, but you also need to make sure you're reevaluating constantly. And finally, with a reseller example of Sneaker Mart, they have potentially a slightly smaller budget, $15,000 a month. They resell sneakers. Given that they don't really need to spend too much on demand generation, maybe they just want to get the word about them in their local area, or they just want to get across maybe like a free shipping option that they have for any promotions via say like a display campaign. That's an option. So it's only $750 per month there, $1,500 in demand fostering, the bulk of the budget in demand capture at $9,000 a month, and 25% on reacquisition. So as you can see here, you obviously have to make a good amount of sacrifices on the upper funnel side of things, but that's fine because that's not something that's really going to be driving a ton of volume, especially on the awareness side of things. So you want to have probably some presence there, especially to get across some of your branding to differentiate you from other resellers, or to even piggyback off some brand messaging of a brand that you carry. Sometimes you'll even get co-marketing budget here so you can bump up the awareness budget if your brand that you are working with is going to give you some budget to drive awareness for their brand. But in general, since the demand here already exists for the brands and products that you're selling, for Sneaker Mart, we're going to let Nike do the heavy lifting on all the awareness. We're going to let Adidas do all that. They have a giant marketing budget. We don't need to duplicate that. We can just, piggyback off of what they're doing and capture that demand that's already there and making sure we just get out in front of the most qualified customers. So again, we want to put the bulk of our money into say something like branded search, branded shopping, ISO search and shopping, and then Facebook lookalikes or similar audiences, really trying to get out in front of those people who have done a qualifying search or really qualified customers. So it's really important to be segmenting traffic correctly here and making sure you're being really aggressive on the purchase type campaigns, so retargeting, RLSA, Facebook dynamic product ads. The non-brand side is very important too. However, you're going to probably do the bulk of your business on branded searches. That isn't to say we should neglect non-brand. On the interest side of things, we should definitely have a budget there because you want to keep growing your business year over year and potentially get people interested in the brands that you carry. But we want to focus more on the consideration type campaigns. And so, yeah, that's a general breakdown of three of our most common types of businesses. But, this is to say these budgets are samples. Your budgets can be much higher, lower. The breakdowns can be different in terms of what campaign types you want to run. Just the important thing is to always be reevaluating your budget, be fluid, and just be concentrating on the type of business that you are and what really you need to drive in order to get success. Jason, do you have anything else to add on the examples?
No, I mean it's great. I think just giving a kind of example of different types of campaigns as well. I think making the fluidity point is very, very important. And even again, you can set all this stuff up, but none of it, like Michael was saying, is set it and forget it. There's a lot of extra optimization, a lot of analysis. I think is huge. Looking at GA, looking at the actual campaigns themselves and how things all work together to kind of pull all the pieces together to make sure that, okay, I'm spending the budget right, but it doesn't mean at the end of the day that you're profitable or that your business is growing. And so this is just one piece of a very huge puzzle, but it's something that we feel like is very important.
Yeah, okay. So I think those were some great examples. So thank you so much, Jason and Michael, for all those great insights along the way. Now I'm going to launch a poll question, and I'm going to keep it up while we kind of go through the Q&A, because I know that we have just a short time here left with you all here with us. So again, this is the agenda. It's kind of everything we went over today. So Jason and Michael provided the groundwork when it comes to e-commerce planning and budgeting. And of course, this can be a jumping point, but we all realize building out your campaign, be it in YouTube, Google, Facebook, according to Michael's examples here, is very difficult because you must be constantly evaluating, reevaluating your campaigns and adjusting your budget accordingly. So if you would like to go over more advanced strategies on how to stretch your budget, how to better build stronger performing campaigns, I'm going to launch a poll question here, and I will keep these responses private. But this is an opportunity for you, the audience, to let us know if you'd like to schedule an e-commerce strategy evaluation with one of our experts, kind of a one-on-one. And if you do, here we have some examples of maybe some challenges or what you'd like to focus on during the conversation. So again, I will keep these responses private, and I will keep this poll ongoing while we go through the questions, but just so in case you would like to schedule an evaluation with one of our experts. So Jason and Michael definitely clarified some questions along the way, but let me get to some really quickly before our time is up here. So we do have a question from Alberto, and his question is, he's working through an awareness campaign right now, and for a new brand with few products for sale, what are good metrics that you would advise for him to look at? So I know that Jason, you did have your upper funnel key metrics, and he wants to know if page views, average length of stay on their product page, or products added to cart. If you have any top key metrics for an awareness campaign.
Yeah, this is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but all of them. So all the ones I went over today, obviously getting really familiar with, even if it is a conversion metric on a very top funnel campaign, just understanding, obviously that's not going to be the main metric you're looking at. But again, time on site engagement, I think, is very important. So maybe your campaigns are pushing a lot of traffic, but are they engaged? Is the time on site, high? Are they going to multiple pages? What are they doing on those pages? It does require a lot of groundwork and taking a look at what the pages are actually landing on. But we definitely recommend looking at the bounce rate and adjusted bounce rate and just different types of engagement metrics. So time on site, are they scrolling? Definitely look at creating some micro conversions as well. I think those are very important just to see what they're doing on site and what different micro conversions would consider someone to be engaged, and then eventually push them into the macro conversion of actually converting on site. So again, all the ones that I mentioned in the slide are definitely something to take a look at if you're not already, and creating custom events as well. So everyone's site's going to be a little different. So take a look at whether you can create custom events on your page as well, that again denote that someone is engaged in your content. Which will then trickle up and help you understand that whether the spend that you're using on your current awareness campaigns are leading to actual engaged customers on site or potential customers on site.
Okay, and then Alberto asked if you by any chance would have like an average length of stay that you use with your clients, or is that kind of dependent on the product and the brand?
Yeah. Another cop-out answer here, it depends. And I like to use that for a lot because it will depend. I mean, if it's something that's a very niche product that it maybe has a lot of maybe information about it, or they're doing like research. I mean, it could even be that someone stays on the site for 5 minutes plus. But if it's more of a conversion based type of campaign, or you're really trying to get somebody to convert on a product, they're going to be doing their research elsewhere as well. So maybe a minute or so is good. But look at your average time on site as well. Take a look at what happens on your site normally from, say, organic or direct traffic. Obviously with the campaigns that are awareness, there's going to be less time on site, because you're hopefully going to find some users who stay on site longer, and those are going to become your target audience. But you're going to have times where it's very low. So you're going to have to figure out for yourself and for your business what makes sense. So again, take a look at what you're currently doing time on site wise, what your other campaigns are doing, and other sources of traffic are doing to kind of get a baseline. And then from there, you can judge whether you're happy with the current time on site, what you can do to improve it, and really hopefully weed out the users who are just bouncing off the site right away.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Alberto, hopefully we answered your question there. I think looking at the average is a great tip, Jason. So I have another question here from Jan. He's starting his direct-to-consumer approach after having worked with bigger retailers. So he's wondering if you would recommend maybe the historically wholesale or the startup approach when it comes to budgeting, if they're starting out their direct-to-consumer and were originally, I guess, wholesale.
Yeah, I mean, Michael, you have any thoughts about this one?
Yeah, I think it depends on how much brand recognition you have already. If you're a pretty well-known brand in terms of consumers know about you, then you could probably start on the historically wholesale path. However, if you are historically wholesale and the actual consumers probably don't know your brand name or products, then you probably want to lean more towards the startup type budget allocation. So it really depends on how much the actual end user who you're trying to acquire, so the BDC customer, really knows about your business. So take a look at maybe what kind of like branded search volume there is out there. If there's a lot, then you don't need to potentially spend a lot or as much on the brand awareness side of things. However, if you don't notice a lot of brand searches existing out there, then potentially that's something you want to invest more into the upper funnel brand awareness type campaigns.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, that's a good point. I think even if you start with setting up campaigns, because it's not always going to be that you're going to build all the campaigns at once, you're going to turn them all on at once with this percentage of budget. It doesn't all work out that way. So you may start with things that are a little more bottom of the funnel just to get an idea, or even look again in your current GA or core metrics or Omniture to see what your current organic traffic looks like, what your current direct traffic looks like. Are people doing searches for your brand, to get an idea of maybe where it makes sense to start more or less on the demand generation, and maybe take more of that startup approach, or whether we should stay with more of the wholesale retailer approach.
Got it. Thank you, guys. Hope we answered your question, Jan. And then I have one here from Joshua in respect to, checking in on your campaign and your budget. So how often would you recommend, or how often do you check your clients' campaigns and how their performance is, and then adjust the budget accordingly?
Daily.
I guess this can be probably the last question, because I know that we're
Yeah, every single second. No, I'm just kidding. It's definitely something where we're looking at it often. Definitely create some type of, if you know your metrics, right, you're starting to get an understanding of your metrics, or what your baseline performance usually is, and what your goal is. You can start to create like different alerts. But obviously with us, it's a little different, where we have multiple clients that we're looking at. We're looking at tons of different things throughout the day. But when it's your baby, your company, or who you're working with, just one thing, it's very easy to get where you're looking at it all the time. And so I just like to definitely take a little caveat there. It's very easy to get stuck in the weeds. Pull yourself back sometimes as well. Take a look at how the site is doing as a whole. But kind of back to the question, we're looking at it very often throughout the week, if not every day. And then maybe as you're looking at it week over week, quarter over quarter, or month over month, and quarter over quarter, you can start to look at different trends. Because as you start to look at every single day, if you get too stuck in like, okay, I did this day, I did this that day, oh my God, I'm down 20%, everything's on fire. That's definitely not the case. There's always going to be these up and down variations in performance. But so looking at it in different lenses, right? So you'll look at it how you trend, day over day for maybe a week. Then you look at it for a month, you look at it for a quarter, and you have just different, ideas of what your baseline is for those different time frames. And then what would consider, okay, this is a major issue, it's been going on for a month, or hey, this is just an anomaly that happened one day, we're going to be, we bounce back 2 days later or something like that. So there's definitely, look at it. I'd say be as granular as you can at the beginning, but don't get stuck there. You want to always take a step back and look at the bigger picture. That's always something that's very important. So you're not stuck in the weeds all day.
Yeah, and to add on quickly, one thing to identify is how much site traffic you're getting will determine how quickly you can identify trends. Say if you're only getting, or only say spending like $50 a day on a campaign, it's going to be a lot harder to identify a trend as quickly as if you're, say, spending $5,000 a day on a campaign. So that's also a big determining factor, is you want to let something run long enough to where you can identify a trend, but before it has enough data, it's really hard to make good decisions. So, and it varies from business to business and from campaign to campaign based on how much traffic you're getting.
Got it. Tricky balance, but I guess you learn with age. So that unfortunately is going to have to be our last question, because I know that we ran over a few minutes. So I wanted to thank you, Jason and Michael, our speakers of today, for walking us through all this content, and a big thank you to all our guests in attendance. We understand that an hour of your time is extremely valuable, and we are very grateful that you have spent it with us here at CPC Strategy. So thank you all. Once again, this is Annalicia, and I'm signing off from CPC Strategy in San Diego.